You're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about their latest reads, views, and passions, alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I'm your host, Meg Hamlin-Black, civic literacy enthusiast and former library worker. My pronouns are she, her. Let's dive in and discover who our guest is today.
Hey, everybody. My name is Nicole Jashlewski. I am a librarian in my soul. I'm also a lawyer, a law professor, the assistant dean for curricular innovation at Roger Williams University School of Law, and I am also a brand new podcast host. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and for the conversation today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Freedom to Read Coalition in Rhode Island. And while the Freedom to Read Coalition was totally grassroots and no one was really in charge, I describe myself as one of the leaders.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk more about coalition building and how to work towards legislative change later in the episode. But first, let's get started, as we always do, with what have you been reading?
Oh, well, that is a great question. So I try to read a whole bunch of things at once. Some that are like more scholarly and some that are more not scholarly. So right now, I got my new copy of The Abolitionist, which is a newspaper which comes out sporadically, is how I think I would describe it. It was launched in 2005 and it talks about prison abolition. And it goes to people who are currently incarcerated, but also to a whole bunch of people on the outside. What is really interesting about it is it's half in English and then you turn it over and the other half is in Spanish. So it's this rockin' bilingual newspaper about prison abolition that's published by Critical Resistance. It's something that I teach about. It's something I think about. But the newspaper only comes out every so often, so it came in the mail and I was really excited. I'm also reading about graphic novels related to law and law teaching.
Oh, fascinating.
Yet there are a surprising number of graphic novels that could potentially be useful in a law school classroom. So I'm reading a whole bunch of them to try to make an annotated bibliography. And that's how you know you're on a librarian podcast, because someone proudly says they're writing an annotated bibliography. And so I'm reading one now called Transhistory, a graphic novel from ancient times to the present day by Alex L. Combs and Andrew Eckert, which really breaks down the history of the transgenderism from sort of things that are happening years and years ago, and where scholars and anthropologists have found evidence of there being trans people in sort of ancient history and records up all the way until now, although I'm not all the way done yet, so I can't tell you how it ends.
That's beautiful. Yeah, when I was in library school and realizing like how important and vital graphic novels are was when I came across the 9/11 Commission report in graphic form. I was like, oh, right. Like this is huge for accessibility.
Yeah, I always tell professors, like, you can assign the students to read the Constitution, or you could also assign the students to read the Constitution in the graphic form, and some percentage of your students will have an easier time connecting with the reading, and in my opinion, actually completing the reading. If that's the way they learn, why not, like, give people things all across the spectrum of ways of learning?
Exactly. And so, especially like my oldest has dyslexia. And so, graphic novels for people with dyslexia, that is one of the key ways to really connect word and meaning. That's beautiful. I love that.
I started this project just because of that, which is I have a coworker who was looking for learning strategies for students with dyslexia. And I came across something that said graphic novels do that because the information tells a story with words and visually together, sometimes apart, but it allows people to get one little bit of information, which is helpful. And I thought, well, geez, that would be so helpful with legal documents, with statutes, with the Constitution, with, like you were saying, big like reports that are really not easily digestible. This would make them so much easier to understand for everybody. And so I'm sort of on that kick lately.
I love that. I love that so much. And then, was there anything particularly fun that you've assigned your students to read this semester?
Oh, I feel like I paid you to ask that question, but we just published our textbook.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. When I was growing up, I never once said I want to write a textbook. And I'm not sure that anyone does that or should do that. But I teach in a class called Race and the Foundations of American Law. We are one of the very few law schools that has a required class on race and law. And at Roger Williams, not only is it required, but it's 3 credits. And it's treated like every other class, like it's graded on a curve. All second year students are required to have it in the fall semester. And we have been sort of piecing together things here and there until this semester when the book came out in April and we are teaching from my book for the first time. So the fun thing that I'm having them read is really not that fun, but it is a textbook.
Well, and now what's so beautiful about that is like you have a source for the students to work from instead of piecemeal and like, oh, I need to pull from this and this. And I didn't realize, I knew you were teaching that course. I didn't realize it was required. That's really interesting.
Yeah, when sort of the racial reckoning of 2020 happened, we had a group of students, our Black Law Students Association, who made demands on the school. And this happened in law schools all over the country, where students made demands to change the curriculum to address some of the issues that have previously gone unaddressed or whitewashed. And our school responded by creating this 3 credit class. So I'm one of the teachers who created it. And it is not like, it's hard to know what people think, but it is not like a class on racism in the sense like personal racism or implicit bias. It really is a study of the history of our country. So it comes out in 3 parts. The first third is history. It's all looking at the founding documents of our country when it comes to law. It's thinking about slavery. It's thinking about colonization. And then getting everybody up to speed with the same history, because depending on where you lived, what school you went to, you might have gotten a different view of history.
Oh, totally.
And so this gives you sort of some foundation. And then the second third talks about some modern day systems like mass incarceration or immigration or education, voting, housing. And then it talks about how have some of the things that started in the foundation of our country, how do they impact the systems today? And then the final third is about going forward. If you believe there's a problem, how might that problem be solved? And is that solution like reparations is an example? Is that solution restorative justice, truth telling? Is there a solution? And so it allows students in a classroom environment to wrestle with some of this. I know a lot of what we think is wrong right now is, everything is happening on social media and there isn't a lot of encouragement to talk about these issues in a scholarly way that allows multiple points of view. And this class really does that.
That's absolutely beautiful. And just to have those conversations and thinking about what exists, how and why it exists, and what could be in the future, and like how do we change, and like even just coming back to the conversation of like how do we make systemic change.
I also think it's really hard.
Oh yeah.
Like, because if you sit around and say, well, geez, how do I make systemic change? It's not like it's something you can do today. It requires all this work. It requires like significant buy-in. It might not happen at all, and you sort of have to understand that from the beginning. It is very much different at sort of the federal level as the state level or the local level. And it also is thinking about what is our role as a lawyer? In what way do lawyers make systemic change? Is that as legislators? Is it as judges? Is it as attorneys who are in cases that may be challenging civil rights laws or supporting civil rights laws, or in what ways are we making change, if at all? And what is the quote unquote right way to do that? if you think that change is necessary in any particular situation. And I think like we sort of have this myth of like, oh, if you don't like a law, just change it. But it's not like that easy.
No, it's not at all.
Right. It's not like, oh, well, I don't like the speed limit. And like, if you get a ticket, like, there's this idea of like, well, if you didn't like the speed limit, you know, you should either go the speed limit or change the law, but you can't just like do that on a Tuesday.
Right.
And so, I don't know, we sort of wrestle with a lot of those issues.
Yeah. Oh, I bet the classroom discussions are fascinating. But, and also just like how they carry those conversations with them going forward.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things I struggle with. I think it's one of those classes where you're not really going to know next year. So it's not tested on the bar. This isn't something where when they graduate and take the bar exam, I'm going to know they sort of like got it or if it mattered. I think it's really going to take them like becoming lawyers and practicing in whatever capacity that is, and to see if any of the things impacted them. And, you know, maybe we see it on sort of a micro level in their internships or externships, but I do think it's going to take like going out and practicing and really wrestling with your place in the law before you really know if this made an impact or helped or hurt in any way.
Yes. And that comes back to systemic change. You're not going to know now. You're not going to know 5 years. I am reading Liz Gatako's book, Fucked Up Fairy Tales, which comes out on October 7th for listeners who are looking forward to pre-ordering it. I highly recommend it. I'll be in conversation with her at Riff Raff on the day her book comes out.
And I could not say enough good things. Liz and I went to library school together, and we've been friends ever since.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Oh, I knew you were friends with her. I didn't know you went to library school together.
Yeah. We went to library school, and we had in library school, you have a lot of class projects, like group projects with people.
Yes, so many group projects in library school.
And we were in a group project together, and all of the other members of our group were not good. And so I called her on her cell phone and I was like, hey, I don't know what's going on with this project, but you seem like a nice person. And ever since then, we have been friends. She is the most talented person that I've ever met at everything.
Right.
I have seen her act. I have seen her sing. We did a legal research coloring book together, which I co-wrote and she illustrated. I've seen her artwork. She is good at everything. If she wasn't so amazing, it would be annoying. But I was going to also say, yes, I'm going to be there on the day the book comes out. I'm so excited for everything Liz Gatako does.
It's going to be so fun. I know her through the library world. I play D&D with her once a month. Like, I read the intro last night and I was just like, oh my God, this is so good. And like annotating it with like hearts, like, I love this. But yeah, no, she's just a wonderful human being.
Yeah. And isn't it illustrated by her sister, I think?
Yes, her sister illustrated it.
The entire family is like weirdly talented at everything.
I don't know if you can see this, but like sitting at a spinning wheel surrounded by flames. Like, I feel that.
Oh, it's beautiful. Sounds like things that are going on in life right now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, moving along, are you watching any good TV shows?
This is where we take a turn. I sound really smart and educated until you realize that what I'm watching is The Real Housewives of Orange County. I love reality TV. I generally describe my love of reality TV as like bad, but not like super bad. So like I love Toddlers and Tiaras, but I didn't watch Honey Boo Boo. So like somewhere for me, there is a line between like bad and really bad, and I stay on bad. So I've been watching The Real Housewives, which the summer is a great time to be a reality TV watcher with like Love Island and Big Brother. But for me, it was the return of Gretchen on The Real Housewives, which is what I've really been digging into lately. And then I'm really looking forward to Monster, the Ed Gein story with Charlie Hunnam. He's the guy who was in Sons of Anarchy and played Jax, and I like love that TV show. And so now he's playing Ed Gein in the Ed Gein story. And I also, to bring it full circle, read the graphic novel Did You Hear What Eddie Gein Done, which is about the Ed Gein story. And so I'm like on all levels prepared for this TV show to come out. I think it's coming out in October. I'm I'm also a huge podcast listener. I have a podcast, which I'm sure we'll mention at some point, but I am digging this podcast called Camp Shame about this camp called Camp Shane, was like a weight loss camp for kids.
Ew.
And so I've been reading about the sort of lurid history of this very well-known weight loss camp for kids, which was more recent than maybe I had known about. So yeah, that is what I have been watching or listening to.
Yeah, I love the balancing out of everything. Okay, so your podcast, Law 401, I've seen it advertised in Dan McGowan's roadmap every morning.
Yes. So I have no experience whatsoever being a podcast host. I listen to a lot of podcasts because, like, every reality TV show has podcasts. Like,
oh yeah,
right now I just started. Like, before we started recording, I started listening to a podcast called Talk of Love about two women who were on the TV show Rock of Love with Bret Michaels back like years and years ago. So like if you are someone like me who loves reality TV, but you have no one to talk about it with because a lot of the people that you work with have like more highbrow taste than you, which is reasonable. There's like Reddit and podcasts.
Oh yeah.
And so I love a podcast. And so when my boss said to me, "Hey, we're thinking about doing this thing," I was like, I'm in. I love to talk, obviously. And I'm really interested in, just like you are, access to information. That I think like law does a really poor job of making information about law accessible. Cases are hard to read. They're hard to find. Statutes are again, they're hard to access or understand. Things are written in legalese. And what I like about the podcast that we're doing is one of us, me as a lawyer from Rhode Island, the other one of us, Michael Donnelly Boylan, who's my boss, is a non-lawyer from Massachusetts. And we talk about law-related issues that are happening in and around Rhode Island. And we break it down so people who are not lawyers can understand it. Because lawyers don't need a podcast talking about law. Non-lawyers need a podcast talking about law.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's accessible both in terms of content and presentation. So it's like super fun and easy entry point. And you guys do it with video, which I would probably die because clearly I'm handling this very well.
I want to make law more accessible, period. And if that means I have to put on some makeup and some wild earrings and sit in a studio and record, even though I'm deeply, deeply uncomfortable with it, fine. Because there are some people, I'm not saying my dad, but maybe my dad, who doesn't know how to access a podcast. But if I send him a YouTube link, we'll watch it.
Right.
And so I feel like we do a good job of talking about legal issues without taking ourselves as seriously as many lawyers do. And as a lawyer, I feel qualified to say that.
Yes, and it's true. You guys are serious about the topics you're talking about, but you don't take yourself seriously. So it just feels very inviting and warm. I think the Who Decides What You Read episode is just like a really great entry episode. I mean, that's where I started with Cheryl Space and
Dan Novak.
He was fascinating.
Yeah, he's a First Amendment attorney at Penguin Random House, which from what I understand is like the largest publisher, largest like trade publisher. And he's like so like normal and down to earth. And you can ask him questions like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And he'll sort of talk it through in a way that sort of anyone could understand, which I think is nice because the First Amendment law isn't maybe as easy as it should be to understand.
Oh, it's complicated. And then Cheryl is just wonderful. And I have a tendency to fangirl whenever I see her, which is fairly often. She's my librarian.
She's like very lovely and competent. And like, she just seems like a consummate librarian's librarian.
Yeah. And because she has that children's librarianship background, she's also really good about talking about censorship. A couple of years ago, my daughter and I went to the Providence International Children's Film Festival at one of the community libraries of Providence. And it was a documentary focused on little kids talking about how censorship impacts them. And I think my daughter was probably 7 at the time, too cool to sit next to me, but she sits in front of me and she reaches her hand behind her and like holds my hand because she's like, oh, we have these books at home. These books are at the library. And then afterwards, Cheryl and I forgot who else sit down and they do a Q&A with the kids. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell this story on the podcast, but I feel like I had parents who are really open to allowing me to explore topics that I was interested in exploring. And I go into the story in more detail on Law 401. But what I think my takeaway is that because I was able to read and learn sort of beyond my grade level and beyond subject matters that maybe all parents would be comfortable with, I really learned a lot about things that have impacted my career trajectory and have like formed me into the person I am. And so I would read a lot about crime. I would read a lot about lynching and understanding the history of race, which not everyone is going to agree that that's what an 8-year-old should be reading or a 10-year-old should be reading. But my parents were very understanding and willing to sit down and talk about things with me if I didn't understand them or I was upset by them or shocked by them. And I think that really goes a long way to end up being somebody who writes a race in the law textbook. And so for me, like the idea of censorship, it's not just personal to me, but it's personal to people and their kids. Like I don't have any kids, but I think that it's you and your kids' relationship as parent and child to figure out what that means for you in a way where I don't think it's the librarian's business. I think it's the librarian's business or the library's business to make information accessible. But I think it is a parent and child relationship, and however you think that should be, whether that's like a religious decision or it's more of a protection decision. But I think it's your decision to make about your child. And I think libraries should have a lot of material to best help you not only make that decision, but also so there's resources so you and your kids can talk about the decisions that you're making.
Exactly. And when you are only sharing, when there's only access to one narrative, whether it's what a family looks like, what girls do, whatever, we know that representation matters. And I was at a book talk at Lincoln, the Lincoln School last year, and one of my daughter's favorite authors was on the panel, and she was talking about in her home state of Utah, where there is a ton of book censorship, suicide is the number one cause of death for people under the age of 18. And like, we're not talking correlation, we're not talking causation, but we are talking about that representation matters. So not to completely replicate your episode, but can you talk to me about how you got involved in the Freedom to Read bill, and just like, how did you get involved in state level legislative government?
Sure. So I'm going to blame my dad for this. My dad has been a social justice advocate I think I would describe both of my parents as advocates for my entire life. But in particular, maybe 20 years ago now, my dad really started advocating more actively with the Rhode Island legislature, particularly around the issue of what they then called same-sex marriage or marriage equality, what we now just call marriage. And he is a minister, and I guess there is a perception that there was not members of the religious community who supported same-sex marriage, marriage equality, marriage. And so he sort of jumped in and worked on that for years. Because it took something like 12 to 15 years of introducing the same bill, maybe even longer than that before it was passed. And so I have this amazing model in my life of someone who had done that. And because I am a dutiful daughter, I often get pulled into doing things that maybe are not my idea, but I go along with. Like, hey, can you deliver 60 pizzas to the State House so all these advocates who are waiting to testify on this bill have something to eat? And, hey, can you write an op-ed? Or, hey, can you proofread this or whatever? So it was a normal part of my world. But I, as a lawyer, solidly felt like my home was judicial activism, that like talking to people who are going to be lawyers and ultimately judges, like not judicial activism in the sense that I'm a judge doing something, but in the sense that like the judicial branch, those are my people.
Yeah.
Like I talk to lawyers, I talk to members of the bar, I work on committees. That's what I do. And then the Freedom to Read bill, which was several bills a few years ago, came up, and I felt like I couldn't turn away. I felt like it was very related to law, and it was very related to librarianship, and those are like my sort of like two loves in life, and my boyfriend and my dog and my family. But really, law and
Yeah.
librarianship, just don't tell them. And it seemed a time like everything is going on politically. This is not the time to sit down. This is the time to stand up. And so, because the issues were so important, but also because the books that are being censored in our state, but mostly beyond our state, are directly related to diversity. And whether that's diversity in authors of color or characters of color or LGBTQIA authors or LGBTQ characters, it is a diversity issue. And I think that people think the freedom to read is a librarian issue, and it is. But it is also a general First Amendment issue where all people should have access to stories of other people, and not just the ones that look like them, or not just the ones that are picked by a largely white profession. There are all these sort of diversity issues that run throughout. And I just got involved because I thought it was the right thing. And so we started talking to other people who were also trying to advocate for this. So people like Ed Garza and Cheryl Space from the Rhode Island Library Association, people at the Rhode Island Council of Churches, like my dad, and authors and illustrators from Authors Against Book Bans. There are sort of all these people, and we started these conversations, and we had several bills last year, and at the last minute, they did not pass. And so after we figured out they were not going to pass, we then doubled down on our efforts and decided, well, okay, this didn't work. What could work? And so we built a very broad coalition of people, and made this not a librarian and author issue, but an everybody issue, while also taking models from other states' legislation to create a draft of what the first bill was, so that we would come back at the beginning of session this last year and have a product, talk to our sponsors, and have broad support for it. And we would push to try and get it passed.
Okay, cool. So you kind of covered some of my other questions, which is great. We can kind of dig into them a little more.
Sure.
You talked about your dad's involvement with the Marriage Equality Act, which I'm drawing a blank on what year that passed in Rhode Island. But you said it took like 12 years of bill being introduced and reintroduced and reintroduced. And one of the things about the Rhode Island legislative process is if a bill doesn't pass in that year's session, unless now I think the rules have changed a little bit, unless a legislator like fills out a bunch of paperwork, that's when it dies. And so really a bill dies at the end of session, typically sometime in June, and then it has to be reintroduced the following year.
And the other thing that's tricky is it doesn't say the bill died. Like,
right, no, it just, the last action on that timeline is just like, it got passed out of committee. And you're like, okay, well then what? It's like, well, nothing. Or the Senate passed it and you're like, cool. And then it's like, oh no, that's the last action on the bill, and it needs to go through both. And so again, a twofold question. Like, I loved that you said that you started the coalition building, like what it sounds like right at the end of session last year, which is really when, if you're going to have solid legislation, it needs to get going. So like, who was involved in that? Like when you circled up and like, okay, how are we going to make this even better and stronger? And then how do you keep everyone like motivated? Because if this took several years instead of, I think it was like 2 or 3 years, keeping people motivated for like, no, we have to keep showing up. So not losing hope and that ongoing process.
It's a great question. So one of the people that I always shout out on this is John Marion at Common Cause.
I love him.
So I'm on the Rhode Island board at Common Cause. And so I don't always understand the legislative process. And I don't mean the law that is written down. I understand that. I don't mean the behind the scenes stuff that happens. And I think someone called it horse trading, that basically not everybody's going to get every bill passed. And so there are pragmatic decisions made within the legislature. Not that it's necessarily talked about like this, but there are some pragmatic decisions made about, like, well, you're not going to get this, but maybe you'll get this other thing passed. And so I think John Marin was somebody early on. I was like, okay, help me figure out, how do I build a coalition? Like, do I just start calling people on the phone and say, like, you don't know me, but do you want to do this thing together? And so I think he was really helpful in showing me that this is done regularly, and also warning me the hardest part of coalition work is when people don't agree on something.
Yeah.
It's not getting people to the table. It's like, what do you do when they're not agreeing? And so I felt really prepared for the inevitability of this is not the hard part. The hard part's going to come later. The ACLU was involved because they are very protective of First Amendment rights and have been for years. So not only Steve Brown from the ACLU, but Maddie McGonigal, who is a former Roger Williams student, but also had worked, I believe, at the Cranston Public Library at some point. And so she was sort of primed from the beginning. Also, I had a student who had, so some students are on this thing called law review, and they're required to write a paper and it could potentially get published. I had a student who had already written about the freedom to read as their publishable paper. So we had something that I could share with people, and we had students who were interested in this issue. And some of the hard part is doing the legal research to back up your claims when you're doing advocacy. So there was a nice group of students, and you can check out those papers online. You can just Google it. But there were people who were already invested in this sort of from the law school perspective. The law school was incredibly supportive, even from the beginning. And then Jeanette and Padma with the Authors Against Book Bans are two local authors who are personally impacted because Padma is a woman of color and has characters of color in her books. And Jeanette has books with trans or LGBTQ characters. And so this isn't something that they're passively interested in. This is their livelihood and the thing they're most passionate about. And they were fantastic, amazing allies. Then the other group of people are the sponsors of the bill, Representative David Morales and Senator Mark McKinney, and also the sponsor of the bill sort of the year before, Representative Jen Stewart, and then many other sort of co-sponsors. They were very engaged. And so sort of from that group, we reached out to the URI Library School and, included students. We reached out to different librarians and libraries all around the state. In different places, these issues had already been kind of cropping up. So there were people invested already in having some sort of momentum on it. And so from that, it grew and grew and grew till we were sort of over 100 people who were regularly receiving our emails and showing up at events. And it was really beautiful. I mean, that's so cheesy to say, but we had, teachers, people from teachers unions. We had people who were full-time lobbyists. We had rabbis. We had people from the religious community. We also had the Rhode Island Atheists. The town of Portsmouth passed a freedom to read resolution. You have kids, elderly people, library patrons, artists, all of these people who are like kind of coalescing around the idea that representation does matter. And we want to make a statement that it matters in Rhode Island and we are going to do something about it. And you have all of these people who are coalescing around how important access to this information is and how we want to protect the stories that these artists and illustrators and writers have created. And we also want to protect the librarians who make this information available. And we also want to give some recourse to library patrons or students who are unfairly denied access to those materials.
One of the things that was talked about in your podcast episode was the fact that this now statute has teeth, and meaning that there is recourse to it. And I think it was Dan who talked about how a lot of states have a freedom to read law on their books, but there's nothing to do when that is challenged. So I was looking at the 2024 version of the bill versus the 2025 version, and the 2025 version is a lot more robust. And so figuring out like how, like, oh, we do need to put this in. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. So there are other versions of the bill, like New Jersey, for example, which we used as a model for some things. And then there's been litigation in other states to figure out what the freedom to read means. And there is this moment where we are all trying to figure out, what do we do as a state if current federal statutes or federal protections change? If for whatever reason the Supreme Court allows censorship or strikes down sort of anti-censorship, and we no longer can rely on federal courts in the First Amendment, what can the state do? And this bill not only allows for that possibility to happen, but also it provides a state response to it, even if it doesn't happen. So, for example, it is really, really expensive to litigate anything, but it is very, 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 very expensive to litigate in federal court. So this allows there to be a state remedy, which would stay in our state, which would be, there's just more access to, and so you could still press your federal rights. But if you are a student in a school where a book has been unfairly banned, you are able to take this up at state court, and then the state court has the right to put the book back on the shelf. And so this protects the librarians, because there are all these sort of like nerdy library talk. There's all these sort of collection development and chat like processes that are going to be put in place on a state level, and like policies that come out to guide libraries in doing all this. But there's also the reality that someone wouldn't have to go to federal court and use the First Amendment. They could go to state court and use a statute to, have the teeth, as Dan talked about, which is like, so it's not that we're aspirationally saying, hey guys, you have the freedom to read, but we're saying, and if it is breached in some way, here's a local remedy that isn't going to cost you millions of dollars. So you can rectify the situation if your rights are trod upon, especially if you're an author or a patron in that library.
Interesting. So my questions took a very sharp left turn of what I was completely planning to ask you, because I got really excited and wanted to know more nerdy things.
I'm here for it.
I mean, but coming back around to coalition building, and you're in with state government, the state house was through your dad and his organization, which they're strong advocates. They're at the state house a lot. So great modeling there. Like, the state house can be intimidating to enter. Like, so for someone who has gone on the 4th grade field trip there, but is now wanting to get involved, like what are your recommendations on how to get involved in state government?
Oh, I love this question, because it really is about access. So one thing is that I do is I watch legislative TV. Now, I have long compared this to like the Real Housewives of Rhode Island. But now we're going to actually get a Real Housewives of Rhode Island.
Yes.
The idea is I treat this as entertainment, not in like a weird way, but just in a, hey, I want to know what's going on in the world. I want to know what's going on in my state. And Capital TV, cheers to them, makes it available.
I love Capital TV. You can stream it right online, rilegislature.gov.
Right. I have the app. I have it on my television.
Yep.
That is the most accessible way, in my experience, to feel more comfortable, because you get to know that these are people. These are real people. These legislators, even though there's all this like, you see campaign ads, you also see the formality of the legislature, the ringing of the bells, the like, hear ye, or whatever the legislative version of this is. It looks intimidating. But if you watch enough of it, you realize they're just like people. They laugh, they make mistakes. I believe it was the Speaker of the House who had to shush the librarians and advocates for the Freedom to Read bill.
That tracks.
Like, it's happening in real time. And it's wonderful. The other thing is, go on the website. It's not great. It's not like a very easy to navigate website, but
It's gotten better.
Yes. And there are librarians, including legislative librarians at the State House, who will walk you through it. But also adult reference librarians in every library in our state will sit with you and show you how to find things to the best of their ability, or connect you to someone who can. And you can read the bills. You can also see the testimony. So this is like a newer feature, which is when there is a bill and there's been a testimony at a committee level, you can go in and you can read the testimony. So for an easy one would be to go to the Freedom to Read hearing at the House, and you can go and you can see there was hundreds of testimonies submitted, and you can go back and you read that. You can see some of them are like 3 lines, like pass the Freedom to Read bill. That's advocacy. Now, maybe it's not the same as like, showing up in a suit and tie and speaking at a committee hearing, but it is advocacy.
Right. And it's still part of that same group of testimony, that it's just not like Capitol TV will record the committee hearing, but the House also puts all the written testimony on the website.
Right. So you could send in testimony. You could type it out, send it in. And also many of the campaigns have a kind of form testimony that you don't even have to think of what to say. You basically just cut and paste something from an email and send it along. You also could show up and you not testify. You could show up, sit in the room, not testify because it's scary, and just watch and see what happens. You also could show up and testify. I did it for the first time. It was terrifying.
How long did you have to wait to testify? Like, how late did you go?
We're probably there for a few hours.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really fast. Sometimes it's...
Yeah, I mean, best case scenario, no one else cares about your bill and you're the only person there to testify about it. You could testify. You could also email your legislator and ask them to meet you for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
These are public servants, and they want to talk about the issues. They want to know. In my experience, maybe there's exceptions, but in my experience, the legislators want to know what their constituents are thinking about issues and what is going to resonate with their constituents, because that's their job, but also because they want to get reelected. And
exactly,
this is a way to get reelected, but it's also a way to be engaged in the issues.
Right. And Rhode Island is so small. Like, I run into my state senator at the playground.
And are they a big, scary person who you could never talk to?
No, exactly. It was just like, oh, hey, how's it going? And so when I was at the State House, I always was like to my interns, I'm like, okay, you're going to go watch session one night. You're going to go up, you're going to sit in the gallery. Those seats are not comfortable. And you're going to watch and just realize that, oh, no, there is decorum, there is a process, but these are just normal people. And I loved when you said that you treat Capitol TV like reality TV, because I always joke that democracy is just filled with hot gossip, because so much is public information and just out there for us to be like, ooh.
Fun fact, I also was a legislative law librarian. So I worked at the Maine legislature as nonpartisan staff in the library.
Oh, that's awesome. It's a fun job.
Yeah, I really felt like this is what I'm called to do. Like, I'm called to give people access to information. And I think people have asked me, well, what if it's a legislator that you disagree with? No, that's great. If I can give like true, actual, factual information and statistics to people that disagree with me, even better.
Exactly.
Because then we can all agree that these are the facts. And now let's talk about where we are on the issues. And it's probably a lot closer than anyone imagines it to be. But everyone who wants information and facts, like the more people, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Everything that you've talked about in terms of access to information just like makes my heart sing. And the plug for the Legislative Library at the State House, there's 3 librarians there who are absolutely phenomenal and more than happy to bend over backwards to help people learn how to use the General Assembly's website, find bills. When I was there, my favorite things that I made in terms of access is we created an anatomy of a bill, because what are all these numbers? What does sub A mean? What does sub AA mean? Or if you go really far back, what does AM mean? But it's really fascinating, just that wealth of information that's there. But as librarians, we know it's so hard to ask for what you don't know exists.
I also think there's a stigma.
Yes.
Like, I think that there's some people who love libraries and love librarians and have no problem asking for help. But it is like studied scientifically that people have anxiety. They're not very comfortable going up and asking a librarian for help. And so I just want people to know, like, that's the whole job of being a librarian.
And it's the best part.
Right. The entire job is to make information accessible to you. And whether that information is an Ellen Hildebrand novel for your beach read, which I'm totally supportive of, or it's, hey, I'm stuck on this like weird tax law. Can you help me find it? Those are all jobs of librarians. And we should totally normalize that when you don't know something or can't find something, that you call a librarian to ask for help. And some libraries have like tool libraries or seed libraries, but the one in the legislature is a law library. And there's also one in the judiciary for more case related things.
Mm-hmm.
It should be totally normalized to call people and say, hey, can you help me? Can I have some information on this? I don't understand the law because you use weird words, or there's all this decorum, or things I don't understand. But librarians will always help you. It is their job, but it is also their calling.
It is definitely a love. And I will say, when I was at the library in the State House, anytime that I got like a wild out of left field reference question, it's like, oh, this is fun. And also it's part of the like code of ethics that we can't talk about these reference, like what these reference questions are with other people. So it's confidential. And so like kind of like make someone's day when you ask a question, especially when people are super excited about access.
Also, it's not about our personal beliefs.
Exactly.
You can ask me a question for information that I totally disagree with. And like, not only is that like, okay, it's what I'm there for. And my ethics say I can't turn you down just because I don't agree with what you're saying. But it's better. This is the way the system is supposed to work. And it's a beautiful, beautiful system. And that's why I think like legislation to support libraries and librarianship is like a no-brainer. It affects all of us. And the more support we can give to these organizations, the better.
I love all of this. Is there anything that you wish I would have asked you or you thought I may have asked?
No, Meg, because if I tell you everything I want you to ask me, you won't have me back again.
Okay, well, I would love to have you back or just like get coffee with you because I have a million other questions that I don't think anyone who's currently going to listen to this podcast is interested in. I have some rabbit holes.
By all means.
Awesome. Okay, so the last chapter is where we talk about a library or bookish related question. So I want to ask you, what is a book that really resonated with you? One of those books that just like you hold in your heart and it just kind of like pops up from time to time, or when someone needs a recommendation and you're just like, oh, everyone needs to read this book.
Okay. So this is a dark recommendation because it is a really sad book, but it significantly impacted me when I read it. It's a book called An Exact Replica of a Figment of My Imagination, a memoir by Elizabeth McCracken. And it's the story of a woman who has a stillborn baby, but it's so interesting and well written, and she is so fiercely honest about what it's like to go through loss. And I think every one of us is going to or has gone through tremendous loss. And so when someone in my life is suffering for a loss, I send a copy of this book because it is so meaningful. It was so meaningful to me to read it. And I just thought, yes, like this is awful. It's not a happy suggestion, but it really, really resonated with me. And I recommend it to anyone who is sort of dealing with loss at the moment.
That's beautiful. And comes back to the power of story and the power of representation in story. How long ago did you read it?
Years ago. And it has stuck with me. And this is like part of the reason, like you just said, that I'm so passionate about advocating for there to be room on the shelves of libraries for all of our stories, because there's like a humanity part of it that we're all going to face similar things. We're going to face loss. We're going to face rebirth. We're going to go through some of the same struggles, not exactly the same, but similar. And there should be room on our shelves for people who are dealing with loss, for people who are dealing with, suicidality, mental health, who have victims of sexual assault. There needs to be room for all of these books because these are all life experiences. And I think people need to have material they can connect with and can help heal them or help them heal themselves.
And also, these shared experiences, while not exactly the same, are what bring us together and remind us of our collective humanity.
I think that to me is the thing we need the most. I know there's a lot of recommendations out there about things that we need, like less social media. But I think it's more humanity and more empathy, like this like sort of ideal of, empathy and like radical empathy so that we're really able to see the humanity in other people, despite that we may disagree with them on all of their political issues. They're still human beings. And that's like the message that I think we need right now. And I think stories are what have always done that for me, and I think can be helpful to all of us.
I love that. I love that radical empathy. Beautiful. And so I think we should probably wrap it up. So where can our listeners find your podcast?
So if you already listen to podcasts, the podcast Law 401, Legal Issues Decoded, is available on all places you normally listen to your podcast. But if you prefer to watch us, then you can also get it on YouTube. And when in doubt, you could always go to the RW Law website. There's a Law 401 page that has links to all the different places you can find it.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you for all of this. This was wonderful.
Thank you for the conversation. Like, if stopping in the middle of my workday to talk about the freedom to read and what books I love and what I'm listening to, like, this was an absolute joy. Thank you for being such a great host.
Thank you. It was my first time.
You did it.
I did it. Thank you. And I'll be listening to Law 401. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you'd like to share a book that resonated with you or just reach out to the show, send us an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at overdoingitpod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help us reach more Rhode Islanders. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and is brought to you by library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. Thank you again for listening, and this has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine. When Dave first asked me to host, I was like, I don't think I have any questions. Like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, oh my God, I have so many questions.